Did Miami just make a move with their top wide receiver target for the class of 2025?
You are Locked On Canes, your daily podcast on the Miami Hurricanes, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Happy Sunday. I'm Alex Donno, University of Miami alumnus, longtime South Florida sports radio vet and writer for allhurricanes.com. Thank you so much to the everydayers for making this live episode of Locked On Canes your first listen and your first watch today. We're available free wherever you get your podcasts. We're free on YouTube. We're part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more. Playoffs have wound down. The sports stopped sporting like we want them to, but this summer, FanDuel is hooking up all customers with a boost or a bonus daily. That's right. There's something for everyone every day, all summer long. Just visit FanDuel.com to get started. We will be talking on this episode about Miami's recruiting cookout, which happened yesterday before the dead period. You got a couple of important Miami targets who are going to be announcing in August, and the Hurricanes are trying to put the right foot forward. We are going to talk on this episode about my big picture takeaways from Miami at the ACC Kickoff Media Days. I was covering those last weekend in Charlotte. Among one of the visitors at the cookout yesterday happened to be a Florida State Seminoles verbal commit. Can Miami pull off the flip? We'll talk about that. But folks, let's start with top-rated recruit from 2025 who was on campus at the recruiting cookout yesterday. By the way, it sounds like it was an awesome event. I wasn't around for that. I was making my long road back from Charlotte, North Carolina yesterday, so I was traveling. I was not at the cookout in person, but some great reports out there from the guys at 24/7 Sports, from On3 Sports, from CanesInsight.com helped me feel updated on all the things that happened at the cookout. And there was no bigger name out there yesterday than five-star wide receiver Jaime Ffrench out of Mandarin High School in Jacksonville, Florida. He was on campus for the annual recruiting cookout. 6'1", 190 pounds. Ffrench is the fourth-ranked receiver in the entire class of 2025. He's the 18th ranked overall player in the class. That's according to the 24/7 Sports composite rankings. And what we need to do, folks, is keep that hashtag going. Hashtag Mandarin to the U. Mandarin High School, great powerhouse program in Jacksonville. Miami landed Derek Plaz from out there. He's going to be a true freshman this year. Hylton Drake Stubbs, who's a teammate, seems like he's a good friend of Jaime Ffrench. He was also at the cookout. He's in the class, and I know our guy Drake Stubbs is really trying to push the Mandarin to the U hashtag. So Ffrench, if you follow the visits, folks, on Jaime Ffrench, again, one of the top receivers in the class, Miami is pushing hard to land this player. So he visited LSU on Friday before making his way down to Coral Gables on Saturday. And those two programs, the U and LSU, appear to be the two teams that are making the biggest push right now with Ffrench before his August 30th announcement. And even kind of cross-checking the intel on what the LSU recruiting guys are saying. They think this one could end up being, much like we've seen for a couple players lately, for Jaime Ffrench, it could end up being a LSU versus Miami battle leading up to his August 30th announcement. So his announcement's coming up a little bit more than a month from now for Jaime Ffrench. Of course, we've been battling LSU for players seemingly all summer. LSU pulled off the shocker, landing DJ Pickett, and then Miami countered a couple days later, landing Jaboree Antoiine from their backyard. And it looks like this could be a back and forth LSU versus Miami battle for the next, 33 days for Jaime Ffrench. And by the way, that Jaime Ffrench commitment, whether it's to LSU, Miami, or whoever, I know Texas and some other schools are very much in the mix for him. That's going to happen the day before Miami plays the Gators on August 31st. So that could end up being like an awesome, incredible weekend where, hey, we got a verbal commitment from Jaime Ffrench on Friday, and then you beat the Gators on Saturday, or, you miss out on Ffrench on Friday, and God forbid you lose to the Gators on that Saturday. So it could either be an awesome weekend or a terrible weekend. So hopefully it shapes up to be an awesome weekend if Miami can get some good news on Jaime Ffrench. And according to InsideTheU.com, David Lake was out there at the cookout yesterday. Ffrench spent a lot of time with the guy who could be his quarterback if he comes to Miami. Spent a lot of time getting to know Luke Nickel. I know Luke, who is, of course, becoming one of the ambassadors for that class of 2025. Miami committed quarterback. He's, really pushing hard for Ffrench and trying to convince Ffrench to join him. And Luke he's had an awesome off season. I mean, even going back to last season, Luke Nickel won a state championship with Milton High School, and then he's won like 10. I exaggerate a little bit. I think it might be 2, but he's won a bunch of 7-on-7 championships during the off season. He earned a 4th star on most of the recruiting sites. So Nickel has been trending way up. And Mario Cristobal said it last week. Our best recruiters are our players and the recruits themselves. And Luke Nickel is someone who's really trying to help Miami get Jaime Ffrench over the finish line. Here's what Luke Nickel told Kane Sport. Actually, I think he told this to 24/7 about Jaime Ffrench. He said it would be really special to get him on our team with the ability that he has. I love his personality too, because he brings a lot of energy. My message to Ffrench is to come join us because we're building something. I feel confident in where we're at, especially after spending time with him today and getting to know him more. I feel like Miami is in a good spot, is what Luke Nickel said. Here's what Jaime Ffrench told Kane Sport after his visit. He said, Coach Kevin Beard is a good coach, and he knows what he's doing on and off the field. He's also a good man who's going to give you everything you need to get to the next level. So hopefully KB is in his bag on this one, because Miami would love to get this one over the finish line. On Jaime Ffrench, 5-star, who was just on campus yesterday for the recruiting cookout, he's one of the 2 biggest realistic targets that Miami has left on the board for the class of 2025. If you're talking about who the 5 stars Miami might land could be. So if the Hurricanes are able to land multiple 5-star prospects for a 3rd straight year, Ffrench, along with 5-star defensive end Jose Epinesa, those are the 2 that the Hurricanes seem to have the best and most realistic chance to land at this point in time. Epinesa is seemingly between Miami, Utah, with Iowa also in the mix there. He's got multiple family members who went to Iowa. Miami's been trending nicely with Epinesa, and Miami's trying to improve their trends with Jaime Ffrench. Miami currently has 1 wide receiver currently committed in this class. That's 4-star Dalen Upshaw from Central High School in Phoenix City, Alabama. So if Miami could make I know a lot of you have been kind of frustrated with wide receiver recruiting. It's not developing so far the way we wanted to. There's players we like who have committed elsewhere. If Miami could end up pulling this off on August 30th and land, and then, of course, still have to get it over the finish line, National Signing Day. But if Miami could pull this off with Jaime Ffrench, I think most of us would get pretty quiet on any complaints and critiques we have right now about wide receiver recruiting. Another important, this one, a local target who was on campus for the cookout was Ben Hanks Jr., 4-star cornerback. It seems to be a Miami versus Florida battle for Hanks. I'm not going to sugarcoat this one. Florida has been trending in recent weeks stronger than Miami has. He had an awesome official visit, did Hanks, with the Florida Gators. So hopefully Miami used the cookout to try to swing that momentum back in their direction, because before official visit season, it seemed like Miami had more of the momentum for Hanks. And then he, of course, he's a Florida legacy, took that official visit to Florida. Florida stole a lot of Miami's momentum away. Miami's trying to get that back. Of course, Miami has already been very blessed with their defensive back recruiting, even though we got some awful news last week. And I know some of you are talking about this in the live chat right now, that Amari Wallace suffered a terrible injury. I heard a compound fracture at a Miami Central scrimmage, and so he's probably not going to be able to play for his freshman season, or I don't know. It's definitely going to cost him his senior season in high school. I don't know when Amari Wallace will be ready to play, but bottom line is I am praying for him and his family, because you hate to see anyone get hurt. Especially a complicated lower body injury like that. So God bless you, Amari Wallace, and I wish you a speedy recovery. So, hopefully he would have enough time that he could be, ready to play by 2025 or maybe 2026. But, overall, Miami's defensive back recruiting has been really good in this cycle, especially after landing Jaboree Antoiine, who was at the cookout, by the way. Jaboree was at the cookout. That's one Miami's going to have to fight off LSU right up until National Signing Day. LSU, of course, will have to fight off Miami for DJ Pickett right up until National Signing Day. But as far as Ben Hanks goes, four-star corner out of Booker T. Washington in Miami, 6'1", 170 pounds. His father played for the Florida Gators. Billy Napier's doing a really good job in his recruitment. If you go by the on-3 RPM prediction machine, the Gators are a big leader at over 88%. We take those trends with a grain of salt. Miami trending at a distant second, around 5%, and then a couple of others in the mix. But here's what Ben Hanks Jr. told Kane Sport after his visit at the Cookout. He said, quote, "I just wanted to come here and have a good time, talk to the coaches more, and then communicate with the guys out here." Miami also had, by the way, speaking of defensive backs, Bryce Fitzgerald from Miami Columbus was on campus. Obviously, Columbus is an important program to this staff. Mario Cristobal, Alex Mirabal, that's their alma mater. Bryce Fitzgerald, 6'1", 175-pound, four-star safety. Miami seems to be getting back in the mix there. I know people have been asking me about Fitzgerald over the last month. I hadn't been getting very strong Miami vibes for him, but getting him at the Cookout was big. And Miami will likely be battling Florida and Florida State. So the big three in the state of Florida will be fighting it out for this player. And Bryce Fitzgerald, he's another one who's got a verbal commitment coming up in about 3 weeks. So August 17th, that's going to be the day for Bryce Fitzgerald. So we'll see how strongly Miami can surge from the barbecue yesterday until then, and maybe they can get some good news there as well. Now, when we come back, this was interesting because leading up to the Cookout, we had heard some rumblings about maybe a secret visitor or two who's going to come through Coral Gables. I think that secret was out yesterday because a current Florida State verbal commit was among the visitors at Miami's Cookout yesterday. Can Miami do what they did last year with Armondo Blount and pull off a flip for a Florida State recruit? We'll talk about that and so much more. Guys, we're only getting started here. We got so much to come. We're live, by the way, so if you're watching us on YouTube, smash that like button and subscribe to Locked On Canes. If you listen to the audio version, make sure you subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, wherever you get your pods. We're nowhere near done on this brand new episode of Locked On Canes. You want to keep it locked. Guys, I am so happy to welcome Ibotta back to the Locked On family. It's summertime, which means it's barbecue season. We just had one of those in Coral Gables. You can stock up on all of your grilling favorites and earn cash back on every purchase when you use Ibotta. So you won't have to choose between burgers or hot dogs. You can get both. Guys, Ibotta is a free app that lets you earn cash back every time you shop. Earn on hundreds of items from groceries to beauty supplies, even toys. So you can make sure you're beating inflation no matter what you're purchasing. The average Ibotta user earns $256 per year. That could cover the cost of an entire shopping trip, that fight you've been eyeing, or the fancy dinner you've been craving, so much more. You can save on over 2,400 brands and shop at over 1,000 retailers, including your favorite grocery stores, Lowe's, Macy's, Sephora, Best Buy, and so much more. It's time you join the over 50 million users who use Ibotta to earn cash back every time you shop. And right now, Ibotta is offering our listeners $5 just for trying Ibotta by using the code LOCKEDONCollege when you register. Just go to the App Store or Google Play Store, download the free Ibotta app to start earning cash back and use Locked On College. That's our code. That's IBOTTA in the Google Play or App Store and use code Locked On College. Guys, we're also proudly brought to you by Factor Meals. I've been trying to eat healthier again, guys. Too many of these big dinners out during the summer. Warmer, sunnier days are calling. You can fuel up for them with Factor's no prep, no mess meals. Meet your wellness goals in time for summer thanks to the menu of our chef-crafted meals with options like Calorie Smart, Protein Plus, and Keto. Factor's fresh, never frozen meals are dietitian approved and ready to eat in just 2 minutes or so, no matter how busy you are. You'll always have time to enjoy nutritious, great tasting meals. With 35 different meals and more than 60 add-ons to choose from every week, you'll always have new flavors to explore. Make today the day to kickstart a new healthy routine, guys. What are you waiting for? Treat yourself to restaurant quality meals that feature premium ingredients like filet mignon, shrimp, and blackened salmon. Head to factormeals.com/LockedOnCollege50 and use code LockedOnCollege50 to get 50% off your first box plus 20% off your next month. That's code LockedOnCollege50 at factormeals.com/LockedOnCollege50. Locked On College 50 to get 50% off your first box plus 20% off your next month while your subscription is active. Thank you so much for making this episode of Locked On Canes your first listen and your first watch today. Guys, I'm sorry we had a couple days while I was traveling with no shows. People are like, are you okay? Wellness check on Donno. Are you ever coming back? We are back. We're back on a Sunday because Miami just hosted their recruiting cookout on Saturday. Had a lot of important visitors, class of 2025, class of 2026 in the house, including Jaime Ffrench, who we just talked about, Ben Hanks Jr., Bryce Fitzgerald. And how about this? Miami just hosted a Florida State verbal commit. 4-star defensive lineman Myron Charles was in the house. 6'4", 295 pounds out of Port Charlotte, Florida. It's worth noting this could obviously change. Miami does not currently have a defensive tackle committed. And Myron Charles, despite his verbal pledge to the Seminoles, is still an important target for Miami. They will not stop recruiting this guy until the very end. Here's what David Lake at Inside the U wrote about Charles. By the way, I ran into David at the ACC Kickoff Media Days. It's always nice to see that dude out places. I didn't run into Gabby Urrutia because he just had another baby a couple weeks ago. I think he's on paternity leave still, but it was nice seeing David out there. Here's what David wrote about Myron Charles. He said, quote, FSU commit defensive tackle Myron Charles visited Miami on Saturday. Charles says he is firm with his pledge to the Seminoles, but he wants to still explore some options. Quote, Miami has been recruiting me for a long time, and it's close to home. My recruitment is not closed, so I just want to keep things open. So he says he's firm with his pledge to the Seminoles, but then adds, my recruitment is not closed. I just want to keep things open. So obviously it sounds like, if we know anything about Mario Cristobal, all the flips we've seen over the last couple of years, Armondo Blount, Jordan Lyle, Mark Fletcher, Justin Scott last year. Cristobal does not sleep, and he does not stop recruiting until that national letter of intent is signed. I mean, Miami actually seemingly came pretty close to making Jeremiah Smith change his mind on signing day last year. He didn't. He signed his letter of intent to the Ohio State Buckeyes, but it shows you how relentless Mario Cristobal and this staff is. They are not going to stop recruiting Myron Charles or anybody they like, DJ Pickett included, until the very end. So that was interesting. And again, Charles, he's one of the finest defensive linemen in this class. Hopefully Jason Taylor and Big Joe were feeding him all the burgers and ribs he wanted at that cookout, because this would be a big coup if Miami could flip this guy from Florida State around or on National Signing Day. So we'll keep our eyes out on that one. He's a Florida State verbal commit, but Miami's trying to make some noise there. And, as I mentioned, there were also a ton of class of 2026 guys at the cookout. We're going to talk more about them this week when our guy Brian Smith joins us, the recruiting overlord. He's going to join us probably tomorrow, early in the week for sure. And we'll talk about some of the other visitors who came by. Of course, there were I think only 3 of Miami's verbal commits for 2025 couldn't make it to the cookout. So most of Miami's verbal commits were out there. A ton of other important class of 2025 and class of 2026 uncommitted guys were out there. Class of 2026 commits like Darian Coleman, the quarterback, was out there at the cookout, which was great to see. We'll talk about some more of these prospects. Something else that I saw that was really cool. So my guy, Peter Ariz from Canes Insight, he interviewed NFL standout running back Jonathan Taylor, one of the best in the business, on the Agency podcast. Now, why is an interview with Jonathan Taylor? Why is that relevant to Miami Hurricanes football fans? Well, Jonathan Taylor has been working out with Damian Martinez. And some of what Jonathan Taylor said about Martinez, pretty eye-opening stuff, guys. So he talked about how Taylor was blown away by Damian Martinez's movement and his agility for his size, because Martinez is a really big back, 237 pounds. And Taylor said he couldn't believe that Martinez was in college when he first met him. He thought, oh, this must be another NFL back from somewhere. And Jonathan Taylor added, quote, it might be over for the ACC after seeing what Damian Martinez could do. And, we talked last week about what Miami's running back rotation could look like. Obviously, I expect because, fall camp hasn't started. It's going to start in a few days, by the way. July 31st is Miami's first training camp practice. So it's going to be here. I think, what is that? Wednesday. Wednesday is the first training camp practice. But I expect Damian Martinez to be atop Miami's running back depth chart, and Mark Fletcher, once he's fully healthy, to be there. And then you've got a bunch of other guys like Chris Johnson Jr. and A.J. Allen, Jordan Lyle, Chris Wheatley-Humphrey, who are all going to be in the mix to get playing time this year. Now, Mario Cristobal did give an update on Mark Fletcher. Now, you guys remember I interviewed Fletcher here on Locked On Canes about 5-6 weeks ago, and Fletcher was very optimistic about his recovery, says he's in a really good place health-wise, suffered a Liz Frank foot injury at the bowl game in late December. And, by all accounts, his recovery has been ahead of schedule. He's been rocking his rehab. Now, Cristobal mentioned something at ACC Kickoff about, Fletcher being ready to go for the start of fall camp. Now, I think in this case, Fletcher's doing really well health-wise. I still expect Miami to just be cautious with him and not push him too hard because they don't want to risk a re-injury or re-aggravation. So we're going to find out in a few days once fall camp actually opens. I'm kind of expecting Fletcher, maybe, this is just my guess, guys, maybe to start doing like mostly individual work in the early days of fall camp. And, hopefully, I think there's definitely a better than 50% chance that Fletcher's going to be ready to play against Florida August 31st, which would be terrible news for the Gators to have to go up against Damian Martinez and Mark Fletcher in the same backfield. That would not be good for them. But I know I think Miami's going to be cautious with him, in short. But Fletcher rocking the rehab really well health-wise. He told us that several weeks ago here on the show. And Mario Cristobal did drop some positive news in that regard. And Cristobal, I'm not sure which outlet, I think it might have been with ACC Network that he mentioned this, that unfortunately Zion Nelson has had to medically retire, which I can't imagine how tough that is for him, because you're talking about someone who had, NFL potential. We know Zion has dealt with devastating injuries over the last couple of years, big problems with his knees. And so I want to send my prayers out to him, because making that decision, apparently, to medically retire from football, I know that's not an easy one. And, to grow up dreaming of playing that game at the pro level and to have that derailed by your health, I can't even imagine what that is going to be like. But yeah, Jonathan Taylor's words on Damian Martinez were very encouraging. I'm going to talk about more of my big picture takeaways from ACC Media Days last week. You want to keep it locked right here, guys. We're cooking out. They're having barbecues at Miami. I'm having barbecues at the Donno crib this weekend. We're not done yet on this brand new episode of Locked On Canes. You want to keep it locked. And I already know you're keeping it locked on FanDuel. Guys, we're 34 days away now? I think 34 days away, 35 days from Miami taking on the Florida Gators. 34 days. It's Sunday today. Duh. You guys know I'm terrible with my days of the week. 34 days away from Miami at the Florida Gators in the Swamp, August 31st. I know you guys are going to be kicking it up a notch on FanDuel. I had a bunch of UFC bets, UFC event in London last night. Guys, FanDuel lets us keep the action going all summer long. This summer, FanDuel is hooking up all customers with a boost or a bonus daily. That's right. There's something for everyone every day all summer long. Head over to FanDuel.com. Start making the most out of your summer. FanDuel, official sports betting partner of Major League Baseball. Thank you so much for making this Sunday episode of Locked On Canes your first listen and your first watch today. We are free wherever you get your podcasts. We're free on YouTube. We're part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. So got a chance out at the ACC Kickoff, as you guys know, to chat with Mario Cristobal, to chat with Cam Ward, Kiko Mauinoa, starting left tackle Jalen Rivers. All of those conversations are available on our Locked On Canes YouTube channel, by the way. So my big takeaways from a Miami point of view. Miami knows all the representatives out there. Cristobal, of course, who's the voice of the team. You three players who are all part of the leadership council, three of the most important locker room guys and three of the most important on-field players on the team. Miami knows they have to earn everything on the field this year. Like, yes, they have their best roster of the Cristobal era by far, and probably the best looking Miami roster in maybe over a decade. Like, this is on paper, and championships are not won on paper. I know the Florida State fans always remind me, hey, y'all are the recruiting champs again. Miami, they just won another off-season championship. Look at them down in South Florida. Yeah, I know. Championships are not won on paper. I'm glad Miami understands that as well. None of these guys are getting caught up in the hype or getting caught up in the expectations. They're only focused on the hard work that needs to be done between now and December, and hopefully they're playing games into January this year. Cam Ward told me building chemistry with his teammates has been his top priority since he got here to Miami. On a side note, it was great not only being able to chat with Cam Ward one-on-one and in person, I also got to meet Ward's parents, which two of the greatest people. I can understand why Cam is just as wise and as hardworking as he is, because he comes from great stock. His parents, super nice. They watch the show, by the way, so shout out to Mom and Dad Ward. It was great meeting you guys out there at the ACC Kickoff, and what a supportive, wonderful family. Again, it just adds so much to have support from your loved ones the way that Ward does with Miami, and I know that support system of his is going to help him achieve all of his goals. So, yeah, building chemistry with his teammates, top priority for Ward since he got here. I had another great conversation with Jalen Rivers, who's become a friend of the show. We had him on a few weeks ago. I was able to track him down in Charlotte. And yet Rivers, he emphasized to me that everyone on that team is learning how to play together and gel as a unit. And, Rivers, he wouldn't give me any indication for sure as to who he expects the starting left guard to be, but he did assure me that he's more than comfortable playing next to Samson Okunlola and Matt McCoy. So it's going to be one of those guys. It's going to be the pancake honcho, or it's going to be McCoy. One of them is going to win the starting left guard job, and Rivers, left tackle, feels like he's got the chemistry and the trust in both or either of those guys to get that job done. Both Rivers, by the way, and Cam Ward, they speak very highly of the new starting center, Zach Carpenter. So there's a lot of praise for the work that he's doing there. So they feel comfortable with the center position. And people are always curious about this, like who's going to really break out and take their game to the next level this year. I asked Kiko Mauinoa that question, right? That who else on what looks like a good-looking linebacking core for Miami, who's going to really step up and get to the next level this year? He told me Wes Bassane is absolutely going to break out this season. Kiko was very complimentary of the offseason that Bassane has had. And in fact, with Kiko had to miss spring with injury, and Bassane really stepped up and kind of took on the extra, not only the on-field role, of course, but the leadership role with that unit. And I think Bassane is probably going to start next to Kiko at linebacker this year. And Kiko was very complimentary. He thinks Bassane is going to break out. He also spoke very highly of Bobby Pruitt, the true freshman, he said that Pruitt's probably like the most intelligent freshman that he's ever played with, right? That Pruitt is just, and we had him on the show a couple of months ago, and that dude has a great head on his shoulders, a lot of maturity, great understanding of football. So you had that. Something else, obviously there was a lot of talk last week about the Florida State and Clemson lawsuits and conference realignment. We mentioned it on the show last week out in Charlotte that the ACC commissioner, Jim Phillips, he is ready. And that legal team of his, they're going to fight tooth and nail against Florida State and Clemson in court. Like they're not going to let these guys walk away for nothing. Now, I know eventually Florida State and Clemson are going to get out, but the commissioner made it sound like they have no incentive to settle right now. And, the big reason why Florida State and Clemson want to leave has a lot to do with the revenue gap, right? That, if you can get into what we call the Power Two or the Big Two, the SEC and the Big Ten, their member institutions get just so much more. We're talking tens of millions of dollars more in TV revenue annually. I was in one of the media scrums that Mario Cristobal was in. Some reporter, I don't know from where, a national guy, not a local guy, asked him about, the revenue gap and the ACC being behind these other conferences. And Cristobal said something very interesting. He brought up the fact that Miami is a private institution that he said does very well financially, and maybe he's not so worried about that revenue gap. So again, like how much do we read into that, right? Because ultimately, when you're talking about decisions to try to leave a conference, head football coach doesn't make those decisions. Those decisions are made at the president or chancellor level, and Miami's currently looking for a new president. Those decisions come down a lot to the athletic director, a lot more so. The head football coach does not make those decisions. But I thought it was interesting that Cristobal basically said, to hell with the revenue gap. Like we've got our own thing going on here financially. So he doesn't seem worried about that, right? Miami's got very strong financial backing. So, if it does come down to, and again, I don't want to stay in the ACC forever. That's not what I'm saying. But I am saying for as long as you're quote unquote stuck in the ACC, it sounds like Miami's got other ways to make up some of that revenue gap that maybe the programs like Florida State and Clemson do not have right now. So it's been a loaded episode, a fun episode. I don't think my air conditioning is working very well today. So if you notice like how I'm sweating today, I don't usually sweat this much, but got to get the AC repairman out here. I got to take a cold shower after this episode. So I want you to smash that like button and subscribe to Locked On Canes. If you're watching us live on our YouTube channel, smash that like button and subscribe. If you're listening to the audio version, make sure you subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, wherever you get your pods. And after you make Locked On Canes your first listen today, make sure you make Locked On ACC your second listen. Kenton Gibbs and I will be back at it on Monday talking about ACC football. You've got some fall camps have already started. Florida State and Georgia Tech, as they're playing week 0 in Ireland, they've already started practicing. Miami starts practicing in a couple of days. We'll have you covered throughout the week on that. So thank you so much for making Locked On Canes your first listen. We'll talk to you again tomorrow on another episode of Locked On Canes. We are part of the awesome Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.